Hello, my name is Mark Taylor, and welcome to the Education on Fire podcast, the place for creative and inspiring learning from around the world. Listen to teachers, parents, and mentors share how they are supporting children to live their best, authentic life and are proving to be a guiding light to us all. Hi, Mary. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Education on Fire podcast. I think the environment of our schools and the way that we learn pays a much bigger impact than I think we ever give it credit for. So the opportunity to kind of be an integral part of that, I think, especially going forward, is fantastic. So thanks so much for being here, and I'm really excited to sort of hear your stories about this.
Thank you, Mark. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me this morning.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Why don't you just take us into exactly what your role is, what your position, and like I said, how that kind of version of what a school looks like in how you sort of implement that?
Sure. I've been practicing for about 20, almost 30 years, 29 years. I'm a licensed architect. I'm primarily in the education sector with HED. HED is a firm that's a national firm. We've been around since 1908, practicing continuously, and we work across offices. The education sector covers K-12, higher ed, and community type projects. So it runs the gamut. Community is libraries, you know, public service facilities, and I'm so grateful, Mark, to love what I do every day, to be part of shaping positive outcomes for people who are users of the projects that we work on with them, and how a big part of it is creating environments that really allowed people to thrive and empower people, and to providing that positive impact is so important to me and my colleagues. Very grateful for what I get to do every day. It's fun, it's exciting, and very passionate about maximizing positive outcomes.
So take us into what I say any given project looks like. I mean, I guess that's sort of how long is a piece of string, but maybe sort of take us into one or two examples, or sort of how that works in terms of how people come to you and you sort of have those conversations to get the project going, or vice versa.
Sure. Typically a client comes with a scope of work that they might have it scoped out. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes we're starting on a master planning level and just really looking at the facilities and how we can, make the most of the facilities, and understanding what their budget is really important. So we're keenly aware of the need to maximize outcomes within a given budget. So that's always a challenge on every project that we work on, is how can we do the most good within the budget that we have. We're going to be launching into a master planning project for a local school community soon. They have 11 campuses, and one thing we'll be looking at is capacity and utilization. We know that spaces are used differently now, kind of post COVID, especially kind of at the higher ed level. It depends, what kind of project we're working on, but how to make the most of the facilities and really shape community. Just this morning, actually, Mark, I was on a call with a local school district. We're doing an outdoor learning project for them. So it's funded by a public utility commission to provide stormwater treatment. So one thing we talked about with the group, and it was a variety of folks. It was the principal, it was some PTA members, it included some teachers. We'll be doing a similar engagement, including parents and some of the students, but getting their input on the goals, and these are second homes basically for these folks, so they know the ins and outs of it, and so we spend time with them there. We do site visits, and just this morning we were really talking over some of the options that we had, and getting their feedback. And that's such a key part of what we do, is to really start by listening, because we need to you know the best project is the result of multiple voices coming in and sharing, because we have to prioritize as well. And so as a group, coming to consensus on what the needs are versus the wants is an important part of what we do every day. I love engaging with our clients and with the users, and it's always the best feeling at the end of the project when it's built and it's come to fruition, and you see how folks are using the space, and it making a difference in their lives.
And I think that's really great to hear. I think, especially from sort of a learning point of view, because you sort of hear architect and you hear the idea of building, and you think very, or I do anyway, very sort of structurally. You're thinking about the actual technical skills you need in order to put that into place. But it's so much more than that. And like you're saying, the conversations, the ideas, how you pull these things together, the working together. And so it's really interesting, I think, for people to sort of hear how that sort of dynamicism sort of fits across all areas of learning and also then into the workforce as well.
Well, it's interesting. We were talking earlier just that you play music and have played music. I play music too, but I think so much of what we do is kind of the analogy is like we're making music together, and it's always all of those different voices and the instruments, and then with our number one, it's like talking with the folks and shaping the project. That's its own kind of music. And then when we work with our consultants or structural engineer, as you said, we're getting into the details, or civil engineer, landscape, and MEP. A building is its own kind of biological thing as well. But it's kind of like I guess the architect's role is to be kind of the conductor of the symphony, and really make the project sing, throughout the whole process. So I'm very fortunate too to be part of such a collaborative, profession. And it's really fun and satisfying.
Yeah, I love it. It's great to hear that. And you sort of mentioned there in terms of, a campus having, say, maybe sort of 12 buildings or that kind of thing. Is it generally that you're sort of reusing existing buildings, or is it also that we're sort of starting completely from scratch, or I guess it may be a mixture of the two?
Yeah, it is, Mark. It's usually a mixed bag 'cause we do a lot of new buildings. We do a lot of new campuses, but a lot of our work is modernizations. And HED has, and I personally have really deep sustainability goals, and it being a social imperative as well. Breathing new life into old building is something that is also very exciting. As much as we can, reuse an existing building and breathe new life into it in the work that we do. That's really fun. I was working on a project, Mark, not too long ago. It was 100-year old school, beautiful brick building. It had some challenges, especially here in California with seismic, but it was, it had just an amazing structure, really, vaulted ceiling heights, excellent daylighting. This was just a fantastic, phenomenal building. And it was great to modernize it and bring it up to new types of teaching and learning, creating some more flexibility within a more traditional kind of classroom layout. We opened up some spaces and created some flexible spaces within it, and it was a really fun challenge to work within this really amazing existing structure and transform it.
And take us into maybe how this has changed over, like, say, you've got great experience in this, in terms of, what someone maybe 10, 15 years ago would have been asking differently to what they're asking now, in terms of maybe what the classroom looks like. Like, say, you've got sustainability there, but like you said, you mentioned about light and some of these sort of really natural resources, which really do make a difference to so many people, don't they?
Yeah, a huge difference. I mean, natural daylighting, just the idea of bringing nature into, a little bit more into our building environments is something that's happening across sectors. I think people are keenly aware, and a lot of it might have been driven by COVID as well. I think the idea of mental health and how do you um, create environments that really speak to health and wellness. There's a ton of work that's been done. There's a nonprofit called Terrapin Bright Green who's done a lot of studies that illustrate the empirical and science behind it, to say, environments that have natural daylighting, environments that have views, um, you know, access to the outdoors and fresh air. People learn better, people feel better in these types of
Yeah.
spaces. And just everyone just kind of thinking about the kind of spaces they like to be in. It's we are biological creatures, and to bring nature a little bit more in into our built environment is something that we're seeing a lot of right now. It's something that uh, a lot of architects back in the day thought of. I think in the 60s and 70s there was a weird gap in the idea of what a positive educational environment was, and so in the United States, um, actually, that's a good question. I wonder if how internationally this was impacted. In the United States, we have a lot of buildings that were built in the 70s that don't have a lot of windows to the exterior, and it was like a weird a weird thinking about educational environments, that students should be really just focused at the front of the classroom, and that windows were just unhealthy distraction. And it's quite the opposite, in fact. And that's what a lot of this empirical data has demonstrated is views to nature and just having that visual break is actually extremely beneficial. It actually improves focus. It doesn't detract from it. So we often are dealing with these buildings, Mark, that are built in the 70s, and we're challenged with how do we get natural daylight in, and that's something that's really important.
And I think I've sort of heard over the episodes that we've done now, well, we started back in 2016, but this sort of idea of kind of sort of equity and equality and everyone having a fair crack of the whip, as it were, in terms of being able to thrive. And things like, I think one of the stories was the fact that within a school hall, which is where the exams were being sat, there were some windows at the very front of the hall, but nothing at the back, just really sort of bad lighting and kind of the amount of airflow and all that kind of thing. And you think, when you get to the exam time, this is sort of the what everyone's been waiting for, because it seems really important in our current system, and so much of it is about these results. And to not have sort of an equal playing field at that point of view, just because of the actual environment they're in, seems absolutely mind-boggling. But I think people don't even think about it, do they? They just sort of assume that the buildings they're in and where they are, it has to be what it is, and you get on with it and make the best of it.
Well, that's why it's so important to us. Hopefully, there's a team of folks that did think about it, and but we inherit a lot of projects. We're like, what were they thinking? Honestly, I mean, a lot of our classroom campuses have safety has come to the forefront as well, with
Yeah.
a lot of things that have been happening. But a lot of the campuses built back then had the administration kind of right in the middle. I guess it was more for having central admins for supervision rather than in the front of the school. So, but what it creates now is this kind of environment where you have folks kind of wandering around, not knowing how to get to the main office because it's somewhere buried in the middle of campus. And so, a lot of times we're trying to bring kind of turn it inside out, make sure the admin is easily findable. The wayfinding. I mean, the worst school is the one that you can't even figure out where the entry is.
Yeah, been
Create
to a
a
few
create
of
a nice
those.
strong main
Yeah.
entry. And we come across these a lot. It's like, there's nothing worse than having people just wandering around. So creating a strong main entry, a sense of community, joint use facilities for community, because we think of what are the most successful schools. They're the ones that really are the center of community. And so creating amenities that can be community resources are fantastic. And then to your point about equity, is like, how do you create space that is equitable even within one room? So one thing that we look at oftentimes is, we do our daylight analysis software. We're modeling the building and basically building it, and ourselves, and sharing it with our clients, giving the ability to walk through before it's even built so that they can see what it is, and making sure it's meeting their expectations and goals. And but we're analyzing it at every point in terms of natural daylighting, making sure it's excellent daylighting. Abundant daylighting isn't necessarily adequate. It might be glaring on a teaching wall, so we want to make sure that we're really and understanding it inside and out, in every ways. And that gets to your point about that level of detail. We're really it's the art and science kind of at the same time.
Yeah, I love that. And tell me a little bit in terms of the different locations, because I guess when you're trying to do this in the middle of a town or a city, it's a different environment than when you're sort of in the country. So does the process of what you try to achieve change then, or is it we know these key factors are things that we want to implement, but we know that the way you're going to go about it and how you implement it's going to be different, I guess, just because of the amount of space you've got or access and that kind of thing?
Absolutely, Mark. I mean, we work across scales and across rural and urban. You know, we have projects that are very, very much out in rural areas, and then other projects that are extremely high density and maybe a new campus on 1.5 acres. And how do we? So yeah, the whole idea of trying to maximize outdoor space is a bigger challenge when we are dealing with urban areas. So we're creating all that opportunity that we can to have outdoor play space for students and being very creative about it, and cantilevering, you know building portions so that we have outdoor covered area, as well, so that outdoor classroom, so you don't just have like a lot of shade structures, you have the building as kind of shaping it. Certainly you have more freedom on large, more rural sites, but the goals of starting with kind of like passive design to save, that's kind of our, it's kind of a universal starting point. It should
Mm.
be, how do you design passively to make sure that it's going to conserve as much energy, and how do you site the building, how do you take look at prevailing winds and the site analysis context, how does it relate to the community. We want to create high performance environments no matter where they are. um, whether it be um, in a climate that's not like California. I grew up in Wisconsin, which is a very cold climate, and my educational experience is much different than what I see here, where there's a lot of outdoor space. I mean, in California, most classroom or a lot of classrooms, are directly off the exterior. We were in a large building because it was often 15 or 20 below zero, and staying inside most of the time. But the way that our campus kind of functioned internally was its own little teeming metropolis. After school, I was a runner, so we were running track and cross country practice around the hallways of the school, and we would run up through the wrestling area, down the stairs, run through the hallway. We would pass the library where debate team was practicing. We'd pass the theater where the drama department was practicing, and I mean, it was like everyone was kind of doing this their thing, and it was this kind of amazing community within one building. So I think the idea of creating community is something that's important, and then creating this high performance environment so that's going to allow people to thrive, is key, no matter where we're working with our clients.
Yeah, because I guess the heart of everything is the people, isn't it? Like you say, and the connection and the community and how you all relate and how you do that, and and it has to look different in every environment. So I think that idea of it not having to be a certain way is amazing, because then you get into the nitty gritty of what it needs to be for you, and then once you have the environment, which hopefully is as best as it can be in your situation, how do you then utilize that as best for everyone? And I'm really keen, how did you sort of get into this field? What was your sort of journey from Wisconsin to California, and that sort of educational interest in terms that sort of got you into the architecture?
I was very fortunate to have a dad who was well, I think it was a combination of my whole family experience. My dad was a contractor, and oftentimes after dinner, he would spread out drawings on the dinner table and look at what he was going to be working on the next day. And I would sit there, and I was very interested. I'm a very curious person, and ask him questions, and just started to understand that language of drawing. I was always very into art and drawing, and then my dad would be doing. He was always building something or fixing something, and just really kind of understanding how things work, and the curiosity about how that is. My mom was also very crafty. I'm from a family of five children, and she was always sewing, or she had a garden, and she was always canning vegetables, and she cooked. She was one of those women who was like the doctor, the lawyer, the cheerleader. I mean, she had like every job, and she was like amazing at them all. And she also volunteered a lot. She was kind of somebody who was in our community, contributing a lot. So I think I think that combination of you know it just built an interest in me. So at a very young age, I thought I wanted to be an artist, but I was always building with Legos and other things like that too. And in undergrad in Milwaukee, I was actually started as an art major, um, and I was also running cross country competitively. I went to undergrad on scholarship. I Two things happened, Mark, at the same time. I got injured, and so I wasn't running as much. And one of my art teachers said, "You should go check out what's going on in the architecture building." I think because a lot of the art that I was doing was very sculptural and also constructing things. So the minute I walked over there and I signed up for a class, I was like, "This looks pretty fun," and I loved it. And yeah, I had to give up competitive running when I chose architecture anyway, but that injury was made it possible for me because it took, once you're in an architecture studio, you're there constantly. And for anyone who's gone to architecture school, it's like kind of around the clock sometimes. So my last semester, I had the good fortune to be able to travel abroad. So I spent a semester in Europe, and the first month and a half, we were in Paris at the Cité Universitaire. It was a class of 16 students along with a professor. And then we had, it was amazing. The city was our classroom too. And we had a number of days between our next location, which is Florence, uh, to go anywhere we wanted to. And me and my friend Jilly Gelati, we decided to go to London. So I was actually not far from where you are, Mark. I spent 8 or 9 days in London, carousing around, and then we spent another month and a half in Florence. And it was on that trip. I thought when I graduated undergrad, I was going to move to a city. I thought I was going to move to New York City to practice. And it was sometime over that trip that every person that we met who said, "Oh, when they understood we were Americans," which probably not, probably almost immediately, um, they would say, "Oh, San Francisco," and I just heard San Francisco so many times. San Francisco is an amazing city, and my sister was living in Los Angeles. She was working with AmeriCorps in Los Angeles at the time, and so when I got back from Europe, I was like, "Gosh, maybe I should look at San Francisco." I'd never been there. I was like, I'm going to go visit my sister. And then we took a trip to San Francisco, and I just kind of fell in love with it as well. And that's how I ended up in California. It helped that my sister was out here too. So I had some family. So I'd been practicing. I moved into San Francisco in 1995, and I've been practicing here in California ever since, kind of up and all around the state. I love that I grew up in the Midwest, and I'm actually going to visit my folks tomorrow. Actually, I'm flying to Wisconsin to go visit them. It was foundational to who I am. Frank Lloyd Wright is a architect that we studied a lot when I was younger. He's from that region, and his work is something that is very important in terms of infusing the sense of community, and just he was doing high performance architecture that was embedded with biophilia, way long ago. And those are things that are thankfully a lot of people are looking towards again.
Yeah, I love it. Well, first of all, I love Florence. We did a music tour and spent just a day or two there, but it was absolutely beautiful. It's sort of almost like no other place I've ever been. And I've been to some lovely cities, but there's just something about the atmosphere there which is absolutely incredible. And I love the kind of your journey from a sense of not overthinking it sometimes, and life just unfolding is an amazing opportunity. And then, like I say, just by one person saying, "Why don't you check this out?" or "Why don't you do this?" and then that opens up a door. I think that being willing just to kind of give something a go, or to open your eyes to something which maybe wasn't on your horizon, but just sort of being led in a positive way. I think that often leads to sort of great success, but also finding your passion and your path. And I think it's such a key learning lesson so often, because certainly for me as well, it's that sort of fixed idea of I think it wants to look like this, rather than that kind of, this is what I'm interested in, this is what I enjoy doing. I don't quite know how it's going to pan out or quite know how it's going to work, but as long as it feels good and it's the sort of thing I'm interested in, it'll kind of take you. And I think it's such a great thing to be able to hear, like I say, both in terms of geography and where you end up living and where you end up traveling to, but sort of that journey of, like I say, from a an art major to then where you ended up, and you can see the parallels and the understanding. But probably, like I said, if you had that conversation 2 or 3 years before you'd started that, you wouldn't have necessarily thought that was going to be the outcome.
Absolutely, Mark. I feel very grateful that, I guess that's, maybe I learned that from just my upbringing, is just to be open, and just have that sense of discovery all the time.
Yeah, I love that discovery. What a great word. Yeah, really, really, really important. And you sort of mentioned there sort of a lot about that sort of educational journey, but is there a teacher or a specific experience that sort of had an impact on you? And specifically, maybe, do you bring any of that into your work or your understanding in how you sort of turns up in your sort of day-to-day life now?
I had a number of teachers that were really inspirational to me. My art teacher was in high school, was somebody who just really just encouraged freedom of expression, and that's what art is all about. But it's my time spent in the art classroom was like one of my favorites. And then in high school, um, no matter if you're, what sex you were, we all took the same electives, and so we had everyone, boy or girl, or everyone universally. We all took drafting, we took metal shop, we took sewing, we took home ec, and wood shop. So it's something that there's more of a resurgence of these days. The CTE, that whole learning by doing, but uh, the my drafting teacher was somebody who was it was interesting because it was art and drafting. So drafting was a more measured approach. So I really enjoyed both the freedom of doing free art, and then the like once I learned what drafting was all about, just like the whole measured approach to drawing something, and that was really important to me. My cross country coach in high school was also really inspirational. Was just really supportive, and just a wonderful person.
It's amazing how these people sort of, they set an environment for you, don't they? I certainly remember my music teachers. There's just something about, it wasn't even necessarily some of the practical things or some of the learning things. It's just the way life was around them and how they connected with people and how they sort of set up sort of the music world in my sort of particular circumstances. And yeah, I definitely can identify with that. What was the best piece of advice you've ever been given, or indeed is there a piece of advice you might give your younger Mary now looking back?
I think the idea. I mean, my I was always encouraged to be curious, and that's something that is just to maintain the curiosity of a child, and really just have fun, and I think that's, I love what I do every day, and I truly, I say, when you love what you do, you don't work a day in
Mhm.
your life, and I think that is kind of key too, is just find the thing that you love, and you can, it just and bring everything kind of to life, there are a couple other, it wasn't advice, but there are things that I've heard that I love. I read a couple weekends ago, Mark, a quote by Einstein that was, what is the definition of success? And it's really of being of value, like the value that you can bring is success. And I just love that because it's, the value you can bring to people, to others, to the world is and the personal sense of responsibility to do the most good. And then there's another piece of advice that is it's a quote from another great person, Winston Churchill. It's first you shape your environments, and thereafter they shape you. And it's about the value that you put in the environment that's created is going to reflect over and over on those users. So those
Yeah.
are things that I think of often, actually.
Yeah, and that's definitely true, isn't it? The Winston Churchill one, in terms of, especially when we're talking about schools and environments, both sort of physically and community led, and sort of that sort of harmony idea of how we want to spend our time. And I think that those three things that we sort of mentioned there, in terms of discovery, in terms of curiosity, in terms of sort of service and being able to sort of show up in the world in a certain way, I think if that's at the heart of everything you do, no matter who you are, where you are, what you're trying to do, then you're going to have a very rich life, which I think is probably what we're all after, really. Is there a resource you'd like to share? This can be personal or professional, but anything from a book, a video, song, podcast, anything, but something you remember that you'd like to share.
Absolutely. I was reflecting on that, and I thought of the movie. It's the Eames movie, Powers of Ten. Are you familiar with that
No, I'm not.
movie?
No.
So the Eames family were incredible designers, and Ray and Charles Eames. They were doing fabrication for parts, for amputees, out of wood long ago, and they got into furniture and architecture. And there's a movie called The Powers of Ten that resonates with me because it kind of talks. Well, there was a quote that Ray Eames said that everything hangs on something else, but this movie is kind of a reflection of to our universal connectedness as people. So it's a film that's amazing. It starts with this couple. Uh, it's 10. Is it 10 meters or was it 10? I think it was in metric. So it starts at a 10 by 10 picnic blanket, and this couple laying on it on a park in Chicago, and then it zooms out, and it's zooming out in powers of 10, and it zooms out. So suddenly, this couple zooms out to the park level. Suddenly, it's at the city level, and then it's like going out into the galaxy basically really quickly. And just in a way, it's like, gosh, we're all like, so suddenly you can see the whole world, right? And then it starts zooming back in, and it goes in and in, and when it hits the point where it's back to the 10 by 10 couple on the blanket, it continues to go in further. So it's zooming into their skin, into their into their atoms basically. So you can see there's something so beautiful about the fact that you know like within us is our own galaxies, and then
Mm.
we're all part of a larger community, and just the world is its own. I mean, it's a pretty amazing movie. You should check it out. But it's something, I think of it occasionally, but I'm always constantly reminded that we're all connected in the world, and then just what we're made of is and the work that I do is biological too. That these buildings are living things that are for people, and I don't know. There's something that resonates with me about that film. It's
Yeah, I love
it's
that.
powerful, no pun intended.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. And I love learning new things. It's great. That's why I love these conversations so much. There's always something to be exposed to, and it's interesting that kind of like say the space and the distance thing, because so often as humans we're kind of like, oh, the moon, Mars, the solar system, this and that, as if we kind of know what's going on. We know it's vast, but we're not quite sure. And then occasionally I'll be in my garden and you suddenly sort of have like an ant's nest or something. And it's like, they can't even comprehend, not that they would, but even if they were in our sort of brain space, as it were, the idea of comprehending that there's another village a few miles away, or the next city, let alone the fact there's another country, let alone there's another a planet somewhere or anything like that. And I think as soon as you sort of realise that we're just within our own environment, our own understanding, and just allow the fact that, like I say, there's so much that we don't understand, and there's so much about who we are in a connected way that just is. And I think sort of accepting of that and sort of being aware that there's so much we don't know, but I think having a relationship with that in some way, like I say, can be incredibly powerful.
Absolutely, and the levels that it goes from like microscopic, what we're made of. There's something that when it goes into the body, it looks like you're in space. So there's like this weird, like circular thing
Yeah, yeah,
happening.
yeah, I love that. Obviously, the acronym FIRE is really important to us at Education on Fire. And by that, we mean feedback, inspiration, resilience, and empowerment. What is it that sort of strikes you when you hear those words?
Well, I think of, I on the cusp of me going to visit my folks. I really think that I feel I'm so grateful to have had them. Um, Being from a large family, there was like a certain amount of chaos, but they were 5 kids. There was like a ton of structure, and the fact that um, they dinner was on the table at every time at the same time every evening. There was discipline, but there was a lot of fun. I just think when I saw, when I see this, I think of the fact that uh, hopefully everyone can find those people in your life, whether it's your family of birth or family by choice, people that can provide really good uh, constructive criticism, help you find your voice in life, be an inspiration, provide discipline and also spontaneity that helps people thrive, and be supportive so that people can be resilient, or support resiliency, be there for you in a way that everyone should have a shoulder to support system, and then folks that encourage and support. So I think I'm so grateful too, just to that we're in a community of educators who do this every day with our with the students, and just folks that have helped support people in the community in many other ways. So I think I think just we've talked about it before, Mark, and the word community just comes up over and over, and because it is in our whole world, I think that sense of community helps to create that fire. And going back
Hmm.
to what it's all about is to have that sense of community that can stoke the fires of community and really be supportive, and um, you know be a sense of inspiration. I think what you're doing is inspirational to me, Mark, and I'm so happy to have had a chance to chat with you and speak with you today. I appreciate so much what you're doing.
Oh well, well, thank you, and I love the fact that everyone's got a different take on these things, and it really just gives me a sense of, I don't know, a real sense of warmth, but I think a real sense that just being able to hear people's journeys, people's stories, and also for me the idea that the just sort of the people behind a website or the people behind a firm or a person, even the real life of a teacher behind sort of the school clothes, as it were, because it just sort of makes you realise that we're all sort of on a journey. We've all got different things that we might be struggling with or things that we're excited about, or how we got from A to B is so different. And I think just hearing all of that just makes you realise that, yeah, my journey is personal, but you can pick up one or two things which you can sort of empathize with or you can relate to, and also think, well, that's completely out of my zone of understanding, but at the same time I completely get it. And I think the way we've been talking, like say, about the community, about discovery, about curiosity, that's something which is universal. And I think no matter what the background, no matter what we're talking about, certainly here on the podcast, everyone's able to relate to that, and if they can take that to heart, I think it's going to make a big difference in their life and give you that connection. So Mary, thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us today, and keep up the great work. I love the fact there are people like yourself making such a difference to people's lives, and tell people where they can find out more about you, how they can connect, and the great work that you're doing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mark. If you'd like to reach out anytime, our website is HED.design. It's very simple. My contact information is there, as well as contact information for my colleagues across the country. We work, again, nationally and across sectors, so please feel free to explore if you'd like to reach out to me via email. My email address is mruppenthal@hed.design, and that's MRUPPENTHAL@hed.design. I would love to hear from you and chat with you further. And thanks again, Mark, for the time this morning. I've really enjoyed chatting with you.
Oh, my pleasure, and thank you so much indeed for sharing.
Thank you.
I really hope you enjoyed today's conversation, and thank you so much for being part of the Education on Fire community. Links and details of today's podcast are in the description, and if you would like to support the show with a small donation, that's a wonderful way to help me bring you more creative and inspiring learning. Please visit educationonfire.com/support, and remember, education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.